welcome to a brand new episode of Black Tech Unplugged. Today I am joined by Rodney Williams. So, hi, Rodney, happy to have you.
I'm happy to be here. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. And you know what? I'm going to just start by having you introduce yourself. Tell my listeners who Rodney Williams is.
Well, hello everyone. I'm Rodney Williams, co-founder and president here at Solo, former co-founder and CEO of a company called Listener as well. Solo is a platform that allows people to lend and borrow from each other. Um, Borrowers gain access to capital in an equitable way on their terms, where the only cost is a voluntary and optional tip and donation. And for the lending member, you decide who you want to make a lend to or make an impact, and you make tips for lending. Launched the company in 2018 and have quickly turned into the nation's largest consumer finance company that is Black led or Black founded. So I think that's a general summary of what we do.
Yes, and kudos to you for all the achievements. And we're actually going to dig deeper into Solo Fund and then also, some of the other businesses that you've done. So let's start with Solo. And we mentioned that there are lenders and borrowers. So with your company, I want to just talk as a borrower to start. So what's the benefit of using Solo Funds as a borrower?
I think the biggest benefit is um, gaining access to this capital, but also gaining access to this capital on your terms when you need it. What we have identified is essentially everyday Americans, basically 60 to 80% of Americans, due to inconsistencies in cash flow and financial shocks, will need a few $100s to make ends meet. Meaning that at some point in time in a 12-month time period, their savings will be depleted. This could be a car issue, a car accident, a medical emergency, and in those instances, they need quick and flexible access to capital. So quick and flexible access to capital. And when you think about that, the options that are that quick aren't that affordable um, and very difficult to access. So for most consumers, that's going to a credit card, which can be extremely expensive, or even worse, like a payday loan.
Mm.
But and a lot of folks tend to sell things, or they try to take on additional hours, or they try to do things, or they go for friends and family. So if you're in this particular situation, Solo is an incredibly easy and quick process where the average borrower is getting funded by another human in less than 10 minutes. And that's from request to funds in your wallet. And then the average cost that a borrower pays in addition to their principal over a 12-month usage and time is only 13.4%. So the combination of quick and fast, but also cost being very, very minimum in comparison to the alternatives, that is the reason why you would use Solo.
All right, excellent. And as you mentioned, I think everyone can agree that, especially in this economy, a lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck, even though a lot of people won't admit that. So we're all one emergency away from having to use that savings or even lose that savings if something were to happen. So I definitely see how that would be useful. But let's go to the flip side. So as a lender, what is the benefit of using Solo?
Well, as a lender, I think the everyday American also wants to grow the money that they do have. So
Yeah.
imagine you do have savings, and maybe you did a bunch of crypto and Bitcoin and it didn't really pan out. Maybe you tried GameStop and Robinhood, a few years ago, and that didn't pan out. The point is that everyday Americans don't not have access to ways to grow the capital they do have. To be transparent, that's a luxury that's reserved for people of certain net worth, right? If you have a certain net worth, Goldman Sachs and these larger investment banks call on you and offer you products that get you 15, 20% yield. So how can you create yield? You don't really have an option. Solo is an option. Our lenders on average make over 20% annually. That is, how you change um, a community. You not only have to provide ways to gain capital, but also you have to provide a way for that capital to grow. And that's what we do. So as a lender, you come into our platform, anyone can be a lender. You can lend as little as $20. I wouldn't suggest only lending $20. I would suggest you lending more so you can create a balanced portfolio. But it is an investment. It is there's a risk and a reward scenario as you decide who to lend to and how much tips you would like to make based on making that loan.
Yeah.
And it's pretty simple. The average lender takes about 2 to 3 weeks to get the hang of things. And we have a bunch of resources that are available. I would suggest all new lenders to opt into our Solo Gold platform. It's basically a community of our best and bright lenders where you can learn from them and ultimately become a good lender.
Wonderful. Good to know. And also, you talk about there's risk with doing this, right? Because there's a risk in doing anything if you really think about it. So, what are some of the risks that come to mind?
And it's a simple risk. It's the risk of every investment. You could lose your money. And to be very clear, I mean, I think that takes into account maybe lending with, there's a solo score base. So there's a solo score that basically provides a risk measure for each borrower. As you can imagine, the lower the score, the higher the tip, the higher the score, the lower the tip. But that's a balance. Yeah, I think you got to be clear to understand that the lower the score, the more risk that you're taking. I think that's super important because this is not a guarantee. There's no investment that is a guarantee. I think the additional aspects is that we do have a safety net. We call it lender protection. So for an additional fee as a lender, you can opt into this lender protection, and in the event that you're not paid back on your scheduled repayment date, that Solo will step in and credit you a portion of what you would have made. It's a safety net. It's really designed for you to have a safety net as you design your strategy and you create the ways in which you want to lend. So that's essentially how you want to think about it. I would suggest, any lender, as you think about lending or any investment option, this has nothing to do with Solo. If I was on Robinhood, it's really about creating a stable portfolio. A stable portfolio is to take some risk, and don't take some other risk, right?
Right.
And you balance that out with the risk and reward, and that's what we're ultimately asking our lenders to do.
All right. And let's just even provide the audience with an example. So let's say something happens and I need to pay a bill. I just need $100 to get by and pay this bill and I will be good. What are the steps that they would take via Solo in order to get that investment or the $100?
Yeah, so they would sign up, provide all of the verification. So they would need to connect their external bank account. They would need to add their photo ID, and then they would need to add a debit card. And all three of those things would need to be verified. That usually takes a few minutes. Once that's complete, a borrower can make a request up to $100 initially. When you make your request, you set how much you need, when you're going to pay it back, and what you're going to pay. So you actually set what you're going to pay. That is in the form of a donation that goes to the platform. You can select zero if you want, as well as a tip. You can also select zero if you would like. And then you post that to a marketplace. Now, depending on your score, I would tell you, please connect your primary bank account. And the more activity that we can see with your external bank account, the better your Solo score will be. And long story short, you make a request, and in most instances, you're funded within within the first 30 minutes. And if you put that in perspective, you literally could be on the side of the road with a flat tire, hear about Solo, sign up and make a request and get funded prior to or before the tow truck driver would arrive to fix your car.
Wow.
That's Solo.
Wow. And I think a lot of people can appreciate it. I think everyone's been in a situation where you just need, that instant assistance. So this sounds like a app or a product that will be very helpful for some. One question that comes to mind, especially because we're talking about really wealth disparity and even building wealth, right? Through the use of Solo. What if someone doesn't have a bank account or a debit card? Because people that look like us, there's some instances where that happens, right? They don't have a place where they store their money, or they don't have a debit card. Is there any thought for in the future how you'll address that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a thought, but I will say from a data perspective, that is
Mhm.
a that is a shrinking population. It's in the single digits even today, and the majority of them tend to be um, um, illegal residents. And just to be very clear, that's what the data says.
Mhm.
The data says the average American with a smartphone has a digital bank, has connected to Apple Pay or connected to Google Pay, right?
Yeah.
And is using, they're leveraging Cash App, they're leveraging Venmo. I
Right.
think we're past the stage where, um, someone who's, if you're on Instagram, you're like, it's just, we're past the stage of that break that used to be present, I think, a couple
Mhm.
years ago.
Mhm.
They, as an American in society today, you do have access to an account. Um, you may not, it may not have a lot of activity, but you do have access to an account.
Yes, I would agree. But I just had to ask the question just in case it might be that 1% or 0.1% that's listening to the podcast. So just had to ask. And, I think this
Right.
is a wonderful concept. And I want to know what motivated you to even create Solo.
Yeah, I mean, it was motivation that was, designed from, the personal experiences that my co-founder and I experienced. I think we experienced our friends and family needing access to short-term capital, especially as we kind of became the individuals within our, community that did pretty well. We just saw a greater demand for short-term capital. I would also say that, I think we both independently had experiences as kids where, our parents, in my instance, needed access to capital and would find themselves short and not have many resources. And then also, very distinct memories of being taken advantage of. With that said, I think my co-founder Travis also, he had a different memory, but he had a memory, his father working at General Motors for 35 years had accumulated a pretty substantial savings, but the bank wasn't offering him significant ways for those savings to grow. And that his savings never really got invested, right? Therefore, that savings never grew.
Right.
And that's you got to understand both of those problems plague communities that we're from. So, there's too many thoughts on just one part of it. You kind of got to create a solution that fixes both aspects of it.
I totally agree with you there. And I think that Solo's doing that. But let's even look at holistic picture, right? You're doing something that's never been done before, and especially at the scale that you're doing what you're doing. So let's elaborate on that statement a little bit. So basically, I want to just give you your flowers right now because you've been doing some amazing work. But also, I want to hear from your perspective as you started in 2018, it's now 2023. What do you feel that Solo has accomplished thus far?
Yeah, I think what we have done is, and the most important thing that we've done is that, we've distributed nearly $500 million of capital into underserved communities. And in the same vein, um, we have allowed that same community to earn, you know, well over $20 million in capital
Mhm.
that is returned, that is capital that's being returned back into those communities. So for us, that's the impact that matters the most. We are helping consumers, and we're providing real banking solutions for real people. You got to understand, when you think about Bank of America, or you think about, larger companies, Goldman Sachs, they don't build products for people who don't have money. They don't build
Right.
products for underserved communities. That's
Mhm.
just not their design. And so, we are an example of a financial service company that's building products that serve the average person. and really, provides consumers with what they need in emergencies, but also what they need when it's time to grow. So that's the impact that I care about and what we care about. You know, I think, as we look at what's next and what we're going to can here, number one, excuse me, we're gonna cross over, nearly 2 million users at some point soon, if not already. But our goal is we want to hit, our next milestone that I think we're going to be pretty excited about is putting $1 billion back into the community. And I think for us to do so, not only are we going to have to continue to do what we're doing better than we've done it, but we're going to also have to go global. And those are the things that I think that excites us as we look at the next 12 months.
Yes, I can imagine going global is very exciting, but also kind of daunting, right? Because it's different regulatory rules, right? There's different things that you have to take into consideration. How soon do you think you'll go international? I know you mentioned in the next 12 months, but do you have a particular area that you think you'll go first when you go international?
Yeah, I mean, our goal is to go by December, launch our first international market by December, and we believe that we're working towards Nigeria as that first market.
Mm. Why Nigeria?
I think for many reasons, but Nigeria is the number one, the wealthiest and highest GDP producing Black dominant country in the world. It's also over 1 billion consumers, meaning it's from a makeup standpoint, it's much closer to India. And it's middle class and its growing class is larger than the United States. So number one, from a pure economic reason, it is an incredible market and had to have produced probably 10 Black unicorns, fintech specifically, meaning
Mhm.
financial service unicorns. They have more Black financial service unicorns in the United States. And I think I think this is just knowledge that may not be aware to everyone. Their financial infrastructure, at least their digital financial infrastructure, is still relatively new, which has certain advantages, meaning it doesn't have all of the predatory, it doesn't have all of the years and years and years of dominance from the traditional players. So it's a market that's ripe for opportunity. I think that's kind of like some of the macroeconomic reasons. I think when you think about what we do, we're basically community finance. Since the beginning of history, community finance has been developed and used in communities around and around Africa and around the world prior to the formal banking system. And what I mean by that, they used to call them informal savings clubs, church clubs, you name it. But these are pools of money that the community would pull together for people in need. This is essentially the evolution of that. And so when you think about that aspect, right, and the other aspect within a community like Nigeria, they have kind of the same problem. Their system isn't giving yield to the vast majority of their population, and their population doesn't have access to equitable capital when they need it. And we want to be there. So I think that's why I kind of quickly, and I also think it's super important also to enter markets where you have regulatory freedom, right, and you
Mhm.
have regulatory acceptance.
Yes.
So I think those are some of the other aspects.
Yes, I think, and like you mentioned, Africa is an untapped market. There's a point I feel like everyone there was a conversations around Africa and tech and being up and coming, and then it kind of fizzled out maybe around the pandemic. But I'm glad that you set your sights and that's where you're going to go internationally next. And also, just on that same vein, have you from a fintech perspective, because you mentioned that there was, and I forget the number that you mentioned, but you mentioned there were a few startups, I believe, out of Nigeria from a fintech perspective. Is that accurate?
Could you repeat that piece?
Yeah. No, I was saying you mentioned that from a Nigerian perspective, there's a couple fintechs that were up and coming maybe a couple years ago that I think it was 10 that you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of fintechs that are unicorns there now. I mean, companies like Flutterwave that are now worth $7 billion to companies like Kuda and companies like Chipper Cash and PiggyVest. I mean, these are all billion-dollar companies. Paystack was purchased by PayPal about 2 years ago. And then there's companies like Mono and Accra that are the plaids of Nigeria. So I mean, you got a lot of activity there as it relates to fintechs and unicorns. And that's just to name a few. So you know that's some of the again that's even that list that I just mentioned
Mhm.
is more than the United States. You know, we're the largest Black-led fintech in the United States history. We have only 1 million users. The largest Black-led fintech in Nigeria probably has nearly 100 million users, right? So like you just gotta, like, I don't know, you gotta put yourself in that perspective. And that's the difference. That's the information that we have that is allowing us to make the decisions that we're making.
Right. Excellent. And also, I feel like that gives you a little motivation or a push, right? Because you see all these amazing things that are happening over there. Why can't that happen here?
You know, I think it's number one, right? It's motivation to make an impact,
Mhm.
and I think that's our goal. I think the only thing that we think about as it relates to the companies that are being successful in those types of markets, it's just more evidence that no, we need to be in that market,
Mm,
right?
yes.
Right?
Yes.
That's what it's saying. It's not about this market. The United States is the hardest financial system in the world. It's the most complicated, the one that has the most issues and challenges and discriminatory practices. It is a complicated and expensive industry to be in. We have perfected our model in the United States, in the hardest market to do so. So you got to understand when innovation is successful, when Uber was successful in the United States, it was successful everywhere else in the world.
Mm,
And you can go on and on and on in Airbnb and to Apple, right? You know, the fact that we were successful and are successful in the United States, I would tell you that that gives us a lot of confidence to be successful in other markets.
yes. And actually, I want to turn more so towards the founder side because I'm sure as you were going through this innovation, as you were changing the original plan that you had, you've probably gone through ups and downs, and being a founder is not as easy as everybody makes it out to be. So, I want to start with from the perspective of so you had this idea in 2018. How did you take your product from idea to launch?
Yeah, I mean, we launched in 2018. The idea was born in 2015.
Okay.
So it took us 3 years to do that, you know, and I think it was a combination of, you know, when we could and when we were ready to go full time. You know, you always have, you know, conflicting priorities. And that was, you know, part of the challenges that we had to kind of go through to get this thing done. But you know, it was part of the process. You know, one of the things that I will always say, if it is a real product, meaning if it's like a if it has real market demand and you have conviction, that conviction will grow in your heart, and eventually you're gonna have to get it done. And that's a big part of you know what we saw and what we were experiencing. We you know we you know, me and Chavez both had successful careers. We were frustrated with the financial market. We were frustrated with the products that we were seeing. We were frustrated with the people that were trying to create products to serve our community. And the fact that we just knew more. We knew that
Mm,
that product wasn't going to work. We knew that that product wasn't going to work. And we felt like, you know what? We may be the only people in the world that know how to bring to market exactly what's going to work. And I think some of that conviction is what ultimately got us here.
was there ever like an aha moment when you were going through that process of like, yo, we are the only ones who know how to do this? Was it a specific moment where you're like, okay, let me put all this stuff to the side and actually do this? Or was it just something that motivation just gradually grew over time?
No, I mean, I think, you know, there was different points in the business that kind of signaled product market fit. And at different times, I would tell you, you know, when we saw the demand outsize and outpace our efforts, meaning the organic traffic towards what we were doing from both borrowers and lenders, we knew that was special. Um, um, when um, when we so number one, we knew that was special. When we saw um, the uh, our ability to manage risk, meaning traditional players within this industry have a default rate 4 to 5 times higher than our default rate. So when we saw our ability to manage risk at a relatively young position in the company, again, that kind of gave us kudos. We knew we were on something special. And I think the third thing is when we basically in 2020, we our lenders actually started to make a positive return, and it was on average they were making a positive return, and we basically quietly started to outperform essentially every other investment option in the market, and kind of continue to do so. Those are the things that we started to realize we were best in the world at this. And because no one had acquisition costs like ours, no one had net lender return like ours, no one had engagement like ours, and these are the secrets that would make this company work.
Yes, and actually, I do want to hop into that a little bit because you can always build a product, but will the people come? And obviously, the people are coming to you. There's no doubt about that. So, within your founder journey, I'm sure you've learned a lot of lessons. And I'm wondering if today you could share maybe three of the greatest lessons that you've learned while building solo.
Yeah, I mean, I think three of the biggest lessons. I think the number one lesson is always be you got to be able to learn, and you got to continue to learn, and you got to continue to grow. I think that is the most important aspect. I think everything else can be almost be thrown out the window. I think the number two thing is that um, persistence and resilience is important. And I'm gonna combine that persistence, resilience with like mental resilience and persistence, so that people understand the importance of maintaining a certain level of mental healthiness. Because I think when the amount of negativity that you may experience, the lack of resources that you may experience, to the lack of understanding. I mean, there's so much lacks of that is present when you are a founder, and then when you're an African American founder. So that's important. And then I think the third piece would be um, um, you know continue to surround yourself with people you can grow from. I think that's super important, especially if they're founders. I think it's super important. Stop spending time with executives at companies, and all of the other people that may be bright. No, I said specifically founders. They don't need to be in your industry. They don't need to be even related to what you're doing. They just need to have successfully started a company from the thoughts in their brain. That takes a certain type of effort, and when you are a founder, you tend to think you're alone. And I think the moment you get to remove that loneliness feeling and start to understand the similarities between you and other founders and what they have learned and how they're managing everything, I just think that those are the three most important things that I think um, right now.
Okay. And you know what? You were in Founding in Color in the last season. So if anyone has wants to hear any more founding or founder tips or anything, they can also go back and watch that because that's still available.
It sure is.
And also, so to wrap up, I just have some final questions. So I want to start with you're in fintech. You've learned a lot. Like you said, you have a lot of knowledge now. And as we know, people who look like us might not have all of the keys that it takes in order to, grow their wealth and, keep their investments going. So from that standpoint, what are some key things that you think people who are listening would find helpful?
Yeah, I mean, I think key things is with the money you do have, you need to figure out how to grow it. And you don't need an aggressive strategy. It could be 1%. to 10%, but you just got to understand if inflation is 5% or whatever inflation rate may be, if your money isn't growing more than that on a yearly basis, you're technically losing money. So try your best not to lose the money that you do have. Um, so you need to invest in things. You need to buy homes. You got to understand buying a home is an investment. It is an investment. It's always been an investment. And taking that money and putting it and investing it into safe options is what you should be thinking about. Um, when you find yourself in a crunch, you know, and this could be various reasons. It could be self-inflicted. So many people who live paycheck to paycheck. Um, it's a direct result of a choice that they made. You could have went to school to be a graphic designer, but then you decided that you want to be a yoga instructor, and that's okay. That means that it requires a different budget and a different lifestyle, and that may be a lifestyle that may be tighter, and that's okay. But that means you need to kind of get that budget in order, and you got to and during those time periods, try to limit your usage of options like solo. Because our goal as people is to try to create a consistent budget and a consistent lifestyle so that you can bear the disruption of an emergency. Um, I think the third thing, as it relates to wealth, is that I think it's important to support each other. And that's a direct result of the capital that you make should help someone else in their entity or their thing that they do, right? So if you have friends or family that provide things that you need, you should buy it from them. You should leverage their services. You should try your best. I don't want you to go over and beyond, but you should try your best. And I think that's super important. I think wealth creation starts with a community, and it starts with your own community. It starts with yourself. And if you're not doing it amongst your friends and family, I don't think it can ever be done outside of it.
And that's honestly a word. It starts with you and it starts with yourself. And I want to touch on the community piece because you've mentioned it a couple times. We have gotten so into like the individualistic mindset in society. And it's nice when I hear that things are coming back to the community side because you honestly need a community to survive. That's how people were surviving, especially back in times where we didn't have some of this wealth or, generational wealth and we were trying to grow. So I just want to definitely highlight that piece and say that community is important. So make sure you find your tribe. And we've talked about the positive aspects of being a founder, but I do want to take a moment to, go through the hard parts. So what's one of the hardest moments that you've had while building solo?
I mean, to be quite honest, I think there's nothing easy about it. I tell people all the time. Um, I used to work at Procter and Gamble. I think my tenure and experience level, I can go off and be an incredible executive at a company, and it would be very, very easy in comparison. And that's my reality. So when you choose to be a founder and you choose to make impact, you choose to make personal sacrifices. And the toughest thing that I tend to have to deal with are those sacrifices personally, like the sacrifices that you may have to endure at the personal level, at the relationship level, at the family level. They're hardcore sacrifices. That's the type of stuff that hurts the most. I think solo being the first and largest of its kind in the United States, I think um, in my normal fashion, I'm embarking on new territory and experiencing what I would call challenging scrutiny from a financial system that wasn't necessarily built to support ideas like myself or ideas like solo and that challenge is a new type of challenge. And it's one that we're addressing and we're dealing with on a daily basis. But again, it's on a laundry list of challenges that will continue to be here. and we'll probably be here for the rest of the time period. I don't think we're stopping with the U.S. or stopping with this particular product. I think this is part of trying to make a difference.
Yes, and even within this process, like you mentioned, there's everything is a challenge, but I do want to call out particularly, especially because you mentioned that the US is one of the hardest countries, especially from a financial regulatory perspective, that you have had to go to court for some things because that's just part of the process. So I want to just talk through your experience there. Maybe we'll just use, for example, when you had the lawsuit in May with the District of Columbia, like what happened and how you had to get past that.
Yeah, so I think number one, we didn't have to go to court, but what had happened or what happens in financial services is that number one, there's a lot of financial services that are regulated and monitored at a state level. So there's no like federal regulation per se. There's a lot more control at the state level. And as I kind of mentioned this before, our community finance model doesn't have a legal requirement in the United States yet, meaning no one has like designed a license for peer-to-peer lending or peer-to-pear models or community finance models. And to be very clear, there's many jurisdictions around the globe that have the UK, India, Latin America, and Africa. So for some reason, the United States hasn't, but that's a separate point. So without any kind of clear rules and ways in which a company like myself should operate, it opens up scrutiny at the state levels for what we do, and that scrutiny came in the form of what became public. We had public orders from Connecticut, California, and the District of Columbia, and what everyone saw from a public standpoint was the resolution of those the resolutions of those orders. And I think number one, to be very clear, what happened, the equivalent of what happened is for your company or your thing, just it's like to get indicted or get completely investigated. And in post the investigation, they said, well, we looked at everything. We looked at every email. We looked at every money movement. We looked at everything. And we don't like some things that you do, but not enough to turn you off.
Mm.
You can continue to operate, but you got to make these adjustments.
Mm.
So I hope every person listening understands what that is and how hard that is to get. Most people that get investigated don't get a clear pathway forward.
Right.
Most people that get investigated get shut down. Okay. Or they get countersued. That's also what didn't happen. And I think it's a testament for a lot of things. What it is a testament, to be completely transparent, it's a testament to the fact of how intentional we built our product. And despite clear rules and ways in which to operate, we created our own rules that were fair, transparent, honest, are just that. They're nuances. And we will make those updates. And we're looking forward to being back on. Some people are like, oh my God, are you concerned with your brand and your image in our brand? Well, I'm gonna tell you this, none of our consumers care. So like, so the people that we serve, they get taken advantage of by every other financial service company in the world. They're Wells Fargo users, they're Bank of America users, they're Chase users, and they pay millions and millions and billions of dollars in fines for doing things that they're not supposed to do. And they have clear rules and ways in which to operate. So when a user who enjoys solo sees the headline, they're in just the same disbelief as we are. They're like, that's not the company. I mean, I know clearly what I paid because I selected it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's no if and there's no misconception.
Right.
So I just think this doesn't hurt our brand. If anything, to be honest, we love it. We like it. we're going to be the leaders here. We're going to be the ones that take this on the chin. These are scar wounds. These are scratches in our armor, because our armor isn't, precedence or the fact that we went to certain schools or we look a certain way. Our armor is in the consumers that we serve and how well we serve them.
Yep. And you know what? Talking about your consumers, is there any success story from your platform that sticks out in your mind?
There's many. Right now, so literally a million people, more than a million people, we've made an impact. I will tell you though, the story. There's probably two stories that I think resonate with me. I think it was someone who needed a loan to take a COVID test so that they can successfully start working. And that like it's the simplest way I can describe, someone who's capable, who got the job, but is required to pay something to get the job.
Mm-hmm.
And this is someone who doesn't have it, right? Um, and you don't think about that, but we do. It's just something that I keep in mind. There's always someone that just is like $100 away from fixing the issue. I think the other aspect is in the midst of the South, when a lot of challenges around abortion came about, you saw requests to the marketplace as a result to them needing options, and I'm going to say it that way. No one's talking about that, but we did. We saw it. Down to hurricane, and earthquake, and tornadoes. There's people who didn't plan on the fact that they gotta go buy some extra plastic to cover the windows, or go. They did. That's not in the budget. The budget is too tight to go to Home Depot right now, and all of a sudden you see requests to do those things. This is the company that's in touch on a day-to-day basis with what's going on, completely in touch. And that's why there's thousands of stories, there's not millions of stories that we will have of being there when they need them. So those are just some of the few.
Well, I'm excited to hear more of the stories. And you know what? I'm sure people listening might need the opportunity to use Solo. So, if someone's listening to this episode, where can they get access to Solos? And an app, website? Let's tell people where to go.
Please go to the App Store or the Google Play Store, download Solo Funds, start an account, become a lender, or become a borrower. If you don't have Apple or iOS and you just have a computer at home, you can visit solofunds.com and you can use our website to make a request or fund a loan. And if you are unsure, just go follow us on Instagram and support the mission, and just support the community. That support can just be that. And those are some of the things that I think in ways in which I hope guys can be helpful and become users.
Excellent. And I will have all that information in the show notes so no one has to go searching for it. Let's support the community, build the community up even more, and help Solo Funds out. And Rodney, I usually leave the last portion if the person who is being featured on the podcast has any other tips, advice, or just anything to share with the listeners. I give them the floor. So now it's your turn.
Oh man, listen, follow me. I have indirectly turned into the advocate of this thing that we're building. And we're gonna need all the support and all of we need to be everywhere. When you watch the news and other people are talking about our community, make sure that they reach out to Solo. You know what I mean? When people are quoting statistics, trust me, we got better statistics. We do have thought leaders and leaders that are trying to address, and we're not the fancy guys in the suits. We're just like you. You know what I mean? We live down the street from payday lenders too. And that's my message. We'll be your voice when you don't have one.
Oh, what a wonderful note to end on. Rodney, thank you for your time today. I appreciate it.
Awesome. No, I appreciate the time.